Okay. So with our magazine half face, we're doing this two ways. So we're doing this using our proportion lines, but we're also doing it using the grid system. So you have all printed out an A4, roughly A4 size version of your front-on portrait, so your reference image. You have all folded it in half, and you should have all cut it in half. You then need to choose what side of the face you are going to recreate. So you might choose to recreate the left side for your first drawing and the right hand side for your second drawing, or you might choose to do the same side for both of them. It's up to you. Once you have cut it in half, you're going to choose which side you want and stick it down. So I've decided I'm going to leave the left hand side of the face. So I've stuck that to my page. I'm then going to use my right hand side to draw from. So we're going to be drawing from observation. So you need to keep that sheet. Then using the measurements on my portrait drawing sheet, I'm going to map in my proportion lines. So I'm going to use my 2B pencil for that, because my 2B pencil is softer than my 4B and lighter to erase the lines. I'm going to start off, and you can be following, by drawing in the line for the top of my head, which is where the hair ends. Is it? There you go. Oops. It's not on my screen. That's alright. So mapping the line for the top of your head, so that's going to be where the hair on the head stops. We're then going to draw in a line for the top of the eyebrow, which is roughly about there. And you might put in another line for the bottom of your eyebrow. We're then going to put in the lines for our eyes. So it's roughly about there. So the bottom of the eye is there. And that's usually roughly where our ears line up to, is the bottom of our eyes, just about. The bottom of the nose, the top of the lip. Try and get it as straight as you can. The bottom of the lip. So the bottom of the lip is generally the little shadowy crease bit. And then underneath the chin. So your ruler should hang over your image a little bit, so then that way you can line it up better. Okay? You're then going to start adding in your features. So you really need to pay attention to the proportions of your face and where they sit. So I'm going to start off with the eye, which looks like from here it starts around about here, so about 1 centimetre into that line, and then I'm just going to, trying my best to draw from observation, so it might even be more handy for me to actually place the other half of my image in my direct line of sight. And I'm just going to start drawing in the outlines of each shape. So remember, when we're drawing things like eyes, we draw our lines in, not the whole shape. The only whole shape that we should draw is generally the iris, so the coloured part of the eye and the pupil. So I'm just going to draw the outlines to begin with. And then what I can do later once I'm happy with my outlines, I can then use my 4B pencil, which is darker, and start building up on some of those shapes and adding in more detail. Don't worry if your image when you're finished doesn't look entirely realistic to what you've drawn. Okay? This is all about exploring a different portraiture style, so they're going to turn out slightly different. It's all about pushing your boundaries and getting you to think about what it is that you're drawing. So really observing the portrait itself. So that's the first one. The second one, you're going to redo the grid. So you're going to, similar to what I've done here, you're going to cut it in half again, but on your other half you're going to draw in your grid. I've used a 2 by 2 centimetre grid, which is smaller than what we've worked in the past because it's a smaller space. So my image was about 25 centimetres lengthways and 8 centimetres across. So it was easier to divide it in twos. I then recreate my grid on my other sheet of paper, and then following my lines, so in my second grid, this line here, so I starts about here. And then just following each square and then building up the detail. And what you should end up with towards the end of that second one is something similar to what I've got here, which is one I've spent a lot more time on, which looks a lot more realistic to my first one. But both have strengths as portrait drawings. So it's not about how realistic it looks, it's about capturing a likeness of the person you've decided to draw. Okay? Don't take too much time, so spend a lesson on the first one and about a lesson on the second one. And if it's a technique that you really enjoyed, then maybe that will be the technique you decide to use for your final practical piece. But it's all about you learning different portrait styles at the moment. Okay? Beautiful.